Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
Hello and welcome to mini episode 359 of Real Life Ghost Stories, and I have 4 spooky stories for you today, and the last story comes from the 26th of April 2024, and story number 1 comes from Janelle. I've always believed in reincarnation but never felt any experiences of my own. However, a couple of months ago my daughter Winnie said something really strange. We were taking her to the park. While crossing the parking lot, she casually said, "One time I fell down in the road and got runned over." My husband and I both looked at each other strangely. I asked her what she meant and when that happened, and she replied, "Before, when I was a little boy," and then ran off to play. She's never expanded on it or added more details, but every once in a while when crossing the road or a parking lot, she'll say it again. She is just turning 3. And we don't let her watch a lot of movies or TV, so we have no idea where she could have learned about that. Gives me goosebumps to think about it. Well, you know what, Janelle, it gives me goosebumps too. Surely there is some sort of scientist listening to this who is like, there have been loads of cases on this podcast of children knowing things they shouldn't know or saying weird shit, generally just being spooky. Why is there not some sort of call at this point? Is there not a need for an investigation into the general spooky weirdness of small children? I think that's what the study should be called. A study into the general spooky weirdness of small children and whether or not they should be kicked down the stairs. And I completely understand that kids say mad things. Adults say mad things. We all say mad things. However, when a child says something that is wild, one time I fell down the road and I got run over when I was a little boy before, and they say it in a contextually accurate sense, so they're walking across a parking lot and they say it then again when they're crossing a road or a parking lot. Like, that is so weird. And where do those memories go? Does our brain just block them out? And I talk regularly on the podcast about things that I believe more than others, you know, things that this podcast has changed my view on, or if my view has stayed the same, or I suddenly don't believe in something anymore, or I think it's less likely. And honestly, like, past lives and reincarnation is something that I'm sort of leaning more and more towards the more this podcast goes on. And story number 2 comes from Jade. I've just listened to episode 231, Aberfan and the Premonitions Bureau, which prompted me to write in. Not related to my story, but I am from South Wales and had never known about the Premonitions Bureau, so this was brilliantly interesting. I used to be a family nanny working for a football family just outside of Manchester. I lived with the family in a posh house. One evening in May 2017, we were all in the house. Mum, Dad, 3 children, 3 dogs and me. I can remember feeling a bit off that evening, thinking that there was something in the air, but didn't voice it at the time. The dogs were really restless, not settling down whilst we were watching TV, but pacing the room more than usual. As the evening continued, I also became unsettled, eventually voicing to Mum and Dad, "Something doesn't feel right tonight. It feels like something big is about to happen." Shortly after this, I went to bed. When we woke in the morning, we had the news on, and it was then that we found out the tragic Manchester Arena bombings had happened that evening. As we were discussing, Dad said the dogs didn't settle and one of them had to sleep on the bed with them. He also heard the explosion and felt the windows move, but put it down to a crash on the motorway. We lived about 30 minutes out from the arena and right next to the motorway. I'm a bit of a skeptic, but cannot ignore how we all picked up on that strange energy that evening. And as a skeptic, we're not allowed to believe in coincidences. The kids didn't go to school that day, and we all held one another a little bit tighter. So for those who are listening who are maybe not from the UK and are maybe unaware of this particular event that happened, so in May 2017, there was an Ariana Grande concert in the Manchester Arena, and a man detonated a bomb, killing 22 people and injured over 1,000 people. And it was absolutely horrendous at the time, and obviously it's still horrendous now, but it was primarily children at this Ariana Grande concert. It was absolutely just vile, just unthinkable and horrendous. And I wonder if, we looked at the Aberfan disaster and the Premonitions Bureau, and it seemed like lots of people felt the Aberfan disaster before it happened. And I've had lots of people on TikTok and various places where I posted about the Aberfan disaster being like, well, it was obviously always going to happen. It was dangerous and people knew it was going to happen, so it's not really a prediction. But there was something more to these predictions. I mean, children the night before being like, if I go to school tomorrow, something bad is going to happen. And they do say that, animals can sense things. But in this instance, this was a man-made tragedy. This was a person who perpetrated this tragedy. And we often associate animals sensing things with natural disasters. But maybe there was something in the air. Maybe there was something that was telling you that something was going to happen. Something bad was going to happen, and it was going to impact so many people. Like thousands, tens of thousands of people were impacted by that particular tragedy. And I do think you're right. I think both things can be true, that you can be skeptical and then also be like, isn't it weird that we all picked up on the strange energy and the dogs picked up on the strange energy and then this awful thing happened? Oh, it just gives me the heebie-jeebies.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
Hey everyone, I'm Craig Robinson, co-host of the Ways to Win podcast, alongside my good friend John Calipari. I've been on the go recently. Phoenix, Kansas City, Chicago. If you're like me and have a home but aren't always at home, you have an Airbnb. Hosting your home or a spare room is a very practical side hustle. If you live in a big game town, you can Airbnb your place for fans to stay in. Your home might be worth more than you think. Find out how much at airbnb.com/host.
And story number 3 comes from Gracie. And just to let you know, Gracie has a really amazing blog called faunagray.com, which is essentially a blog that is dedicated to all of the wonderful weirdness of the animal kingdom, and it is all about different animals for animal enthusiasts. And the whole idea behind it is to give people an understanding and to make people curious about animals and inspire positive change. So if that's not a good thing, I don't know what is. So it's called faunagray.com, and the link to that is in the description of this episode. Growing up, I heard from my relatives about some of their experiences, as well as stories that they had heard from family members who are no longer with us. I was raised in the deep south of the USA, and my family is old-fashioned, so to speak. Both sides of my family were farmers. My dad has 4 sisters and my mom has 4 brothers. It was a wonderful way to grow up, surrounded by love from my immediate and extended family, hearing ghost stories from my papa, my paternal grandfather, jumping on hay bales with my cousins, going on fishing trips in the Appalachian Mountains. So needless to say, we were all very close. I had to mention my papa and his ghost stories because he was legendary, and so were his ghost stories. He told everyone several spooky tales over the years, but one has stuck around in my mind, and it's this one. One of my papa's brothers came bursting through the door one day, pale and flustered, shouting, "I've just seen a ghost! I think I've just seen a ghost!" Of course, with a house full of brothers, he was immediately teased and picked on. Even still, he was asked what happened, and he said, "I was out tilling the fields and I saw a woman walking through them. She was wearing a long cotton house dress, and it looked a little faded. She looked like she was in pain. As she was walking, she was holding her jaw." Now, his brother was unaware that a distant relative was a woman who matched this description. Their mother had informed them that, I believe it was a great-grandmother, had terrible tooth problems, and she often held one side of her jaw because of the pain. She had also been seen walking through one side of the kitchen and to the other and disappearing into the wall. The details are a bit fuzzy on this story, as my papa passed away nearly 10 years ago now. When I say he was an amazing person, I mean that in so many ways. Not only did he tell ghost stories about the haunted house he once lived in with his brother, where a ghost kept snatching his knitted nightcap off his head, the headless man walking through a graveyard he used to hunt by, and several others, but he was also a healer. I won't go into too much about his abilities because it is very sacred to me and my family, but I can say that he knew many other amazing people with abilities as well. My dad told me a story about how when he was a little boy, he suffered from a terrible amount of warts on his hands, knees and feet. They tried everything they knew to do, but the warts wouldn't go away. My papa took my dad way out into the woods to a little wooden shack where a very old man lived. The sweet old man talked with my papa for a while and listened to his concerns. He then gave my dad an old white rag and wet it. He told my dad to go out into the woods far away and find a good rock. Once he found the rock he wanted, he told him to put the rag under the rock and leave it there. The old man told him to never go back to the rag, and even if he ever stumbled upon it, to never ever take the rag out from under the rock. The reason why I emphasised on how old that man was is because my father told me that man was alive at the tail end of the Civil War. Now, I did some calculations, and it was possible he would have just had to have been quite old when my dad was very young. After my dad did what he said, his warts were all gone. When I was a little girl, I asked my grandmother, "Granny, why do I see things? Why do I see people that other people can't see?" She responded to me not as if I was just a kid with a big imagination, but as another equal human being with valid thoughts and feelings. She said, "Well, honey, we may never know why God allows us to see certain things. He has a reason, but we just can't comprehend what that reason is right now. Just don't let them scare you. Nothing can ever hurt you, baby. They can't hurt you." I will never forget that response. Emma, you would have loved her. She was the sassiest old spunky lady with a very unique southern Appalachian mountain accent. She knew she was old and couldn't care less what people thought of her. Her motto was, "Truth's the truth. Don't care who it is." Nothing fazed her anymore. She had 5 children, 5 miscarriages, and took in 2 more kids. She had lived through the Great Depression, beat cancer, and lived through too many hardships to give a crap anymore about the little things. Most of all, she was an amazing wife, mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother. She was hilarious and just so over it. The next part of this story involves elderly death. When my granny passed away, you could feel something in the air that day. That was many years ago now, but I still remember it so vividly. She was laying in the den in her hospital bed and I was cleaning. She had called me over, so I stopped what I was doing and went over to her bedside. "Yes, Granny," I said, "what do you need?" "Come here," she told me. "Come closer. I inched closer and closer to her, giggling because it seemed silly to me inching closer to her until my face was against hers. She whispered into my ear, "I love you, Gracie. You are so precious." I responded, "I love you too, Granny. No, you are the precious one." "You are so precious," she said to me sternly. I smiled at her and walked away. I was going to turn on the vacuum and continue cleaning in the next room, but all at once the power went out before I could start. I felt electricity in the air. I turned back to her and she smiled and moaned in a way that sounded kind of like a sigh of relief. The power flickered on and off and the ceiling fans were going crazy. They were spinning much faster than they were supposed to. My mama came running to her side and so did Papa. There was a lot of panicking and running around during this time, and the whole entire time that she was passing, the power was going on and off. After she took her last breath, the power came back on and the ceiling fans acted normal again. The whole day was normal concerning the weather. There was no reason as to why the power would go on and off so many times that day. All I can say is I think her spirit going to heaven was such a powerful event that it caused electric things to happen. I've seen countless things in my mind's eye over the years. I used to convince myself that these things were just my imagination, but as I've gotten older, I can tell a slight difference between the two. I've also had moments where it felt just like deja vu, but I could predict small things that were going to happen. For example, I would think in my mind, okay, now she'll finish her sentence with these words, then the phone will ring and it will be this specific person. And in these instances, those things will really happen. Sometimes I will have dreams of a certain person, wake up and call them only to find out that they had been distraught or needed help. There have also been times that I will hear a word repeat in my head over and over throughout the day. Then something significant will happen related to whatever was repeated in my head. I'm not the only one in my family that has had these experiences though. My mama told me that one night she woke up at the same time as her father and they both felt the need to pray for her uncle. Later they found out that he had passed away during the time that they were praying for him that night. Once I had an incredibly stressful and vivid dream that left me feeling strange the entire day after I woke up. The dream was about my great uncle. He was very sick and in the hospital. Then he passed away and I was distraught because the hospital would not release his body for burial. I remember that I was so confused and anxious to lay his body to rest, but couldn't because they wouldn't release his body. Not long after I had this dream, this exact situation took place. The same great uncle was admitted to the hospital due to being very sick. He then passed away and the hospital would not release his body for over a week due to COVID. Though I don't understand why I have these experiences, I will always remember what my granny told me and find comfort in it. I have experienced many unexplainable events and I know without a doubt that there is something more than what is generally accepted to be real. Okay, let's go back to the beginning of these stories. So firstly, we've got the woman walking through the field. And as somebody who has two older brothers and most of my cousins were male when I was little and growing up, like, totally understand, you know, you say something, you something has happened and it's very stressful for you and everyone else is like, lol, taking the piss out of you. Do you know what I mean? Very frustrating as a child. But then I'm really glad that he was able to then say, I saw this woman and this is what she looked like. And then the family are like, oh no, actually that's a great grandmother. Yeah. Although what I don't enjoy about this story is the fact that in the afterlife, she is still walking around in pain with her teeth. And that just goes to show that toothache is one of the worst pains that you can have. That even death doesn't release you from the horrors of toothache. And look, it's obviously a day for it in the podcast world, because while we're on the topic of talking about things that even as a skeptical person I believe in, I believe that some people have the cure for things. You know, my mum also took my brother to an old man who lived up in the mountains to cure his warts, and it worked within a couple of days. I mean, it just blows my mind. And your granny sounds like she was an amazing woman. You give me an older woman who does not give a shit anymore. I just love them. Older women who have lived life, they don't give a shit anymore. They're here to tell people what they need to hear. The end. Oh, they're unapologetic. They're brilliant. I just love it. And in a way, I do think it's kind of beautiful that in the moments of her passing, there was physical disruption in the world. You could feel the electricity in the air, that the ceiling fans were going crazy, the lights were going on and off, the power was coming on and off. Like, what a powerful woman, that her death had that effect on her physical surroundings. I think there is clearly a respect within your family for people who have kind of otherworldly abilities, like the cure, like the ability to see things into the future, that gift of knowing. And those examples that you gave are incredible. Like those dreams, those feelings of deja vu, having a word repeat over and over again, and then something will happen that is related to that. That is wild. And obviously this sensitivity to things is in some ways genetic in your family, which I think is pretty amazing. Just to remind you that Gracie's blog is linked in the description of this episode. If you want to go and learn some amazing things about animals, I would highly recommend it. And story number 4 comes from Shell. The first incident was when I was around the age of 5 or 6. My dad put me and my sister to bed. We had bunk beds, but I always slept on the top bunk beside my sister, who was a couple of years older. As we laid there, I closed my eyes to go to sleep, when my sister then asked, "What is that?" When I looked down, there were around 20 orbs floating up and down my whole body. They were about the size of ping pong balls. I lay there confused, looking down as they travelled up and down all around me. My sister then let out screams for my dad and Mam, and when my dad came into the room, they disappeared. I remember it as well as if it was yesterday, even though it was over 30 years ago. There is no possible way that they could have come from anywhere outside, as the curtains were closed and we were in the far corner of the room, or from within the room as it was in total darkness. Myself and my sister, who is sceptical of anything paranormal, cannot explain what they were. It never happened again. My mum and dad told us it was the angels looking over me and protecting me. It was a very crazy experience. A few years later, when I was a teen, we moved to an apartment for a while as work was being done on our house. I was sitting in the sitting room with my older sister and our friend watching a movie. The chair I was sitting on was right beside the sitting room door. As I was watching the movie, I heard a noise, and when I turned to look at the door, the handle was moving. I thought someone was coming in, but had not heard the front door open. The handle went all the way down and slowly opened, and there was a black shadow looking in at me. I could not make out any features or clothes, just the shape of a person, but in the spirit form. And I assumed it to be male, as that was the shape of it, if that makes sense. I jumped up, pushed through the door and ran down the hallway to the front door and ran outside. There was no one there. It disappeared. My sister and my friend ran out, but they had not seen anything because of the shape of the sitting room. I was terrified and could not sleep. My mum even got a priest to bless the apartment the next day, and I never saw it again while I was living there. A few weeks later, I moved back to my house. One night, it was around 10 or 10:30 p.m. My mum, my sister, my aunt and my cousin were in the house. My mum asked me to go to the bathroom to put in a clean towel. When I got into the bathroom, I didn't turn on the light because we have a big window where the light from outside shines in. When I closed the door to hang the towel, I turned, and there was the black shadow of a man standing there, the same one I had seen previously, but it had its back to me. It was standing still. I could nearly see through it, but it was a really dark figure. I screamed and ran into my mum, but this bathroom was small, so when I pulled the door and pulled it back, it hit the toilet seat, which confirmed to me there was not a real man standing there. Then the fire alarm went off in the house. There was no fire, nor was there any smoke. It was all just really weird. I always had a horrible feeling in the house and would never be alone while there. I always felt that someone was there watching me. I didn't think anything bad, but it was someone or something. Now that I'm older, I don't fear as much, but I'm always afraid I will see something again. My mum said she felt the same way, and said when she would wash the dishes it was like someone would touch her shoulder. She asked them out loud to leave her alone as she was frightened, and said a prayer, and nothing happened to her again. I moved out of my family home at 19, and one night for whatever reason I stayed in my family home. My little sister had the steel bunk beds with the double on the bottom and the single on the top. I was in the single and she was in the double. I had sleep paralysis for the first time ever that night. It was horrific, but had heard what happens during it. Not that that prepared me. The ladder on the bed was broken. It was screwed on the top but had no screws on the end. When my sleep paralysis stopped, the ladder let out a loud bang as if something had jumped off me, bounced off the ladder and disappeared. The ladder was shaking. It was one of the scariest experiences I have ever had. I got down to the bed beside my little sister, got under the covers, shitting myself. It could have been my mind playing tricks on me, but to this day I know that ladder let out a bang and was shaking. Myself and my ex moved into an old house. One night while in bed I was woken up by a noise. Again, the handle of the bedroom door slowly going down. A black shadow like the one the previous 2 times before, looking in. Not that I could see eyes, but again by the shape I could tell it was looking in. And I think it was a man. Then the handle went down slowly and closed again. It was a really old house that we had refurbished, and the stairs creaked, but there was silence. Plus we had the alarm set so no one would have been able to get into the house without it sounding the alarm. I laid there frozen for hours, afraid to speak or move to wake my ex up. Again, I always had a horrible feeling that something was in this house with me. I was terrified to be alone. Even my sister's dog would go to the corner of the dining room and bark and growl at the corner, and would look up at the stairs and growl. It freaked me out so much because I know dogs sense these things. I don't think I ever told my ex what happened. I think I was too afraid to even speak about it. Thankfully, I have not seen that shadow in some years, and please God, I don't ever again. My nanny died unexpectedly back in 2005. We had such an amazing relationship, and I was with her every day. But when she passed, I was not present. It killed me that I wasn't there when she passed. I cried for weeks that I didn't get to say goodbye. But I'm not sure how long went by when I had a dream. And I know it's a dream, but this honestly felt so real to me. We stood in her hallway in her house, and she said nothing but hugged me for what felt like an hour before walking out the door. I felt so much comfort, as I feel this was her coming to say goodbye to me. Maybe it was a dream, but it felt so real. This is the last one. A few weeks ago, my best friend's partner had taken their kids to Spain, but she had to stay home with the baby for whatever reason. I decided to stay with her for the week as my work was near, and to be a good friend and keep her company. One of the days we were sitting on the couches just chatting with no TV on. It was quiet other than us talking. The doorbell rang, so I looked out the window as I could see the door, but there was no one there. We were confused, so my friend went to her phone to look at the video, and the doorbell had rang, but no one was there. We were confused, but we just kind of brushed it off. We started chatting again, and the dial on the heater turned around by itself. The heater was on. You need to physically turn this on. It can't just twist itself. Needless to say, we shit ourselves. But then we realised it's her mum who had passed away in the house months before. I'm sure she was saying hello to us, but we were still freaked. Shell, going back to your first story, what the heck was going on there? So you're lying in bed and there's all these orbs floating up and down your whole body, the size of ping pong balls. Oh my God, what was happening there? And then obviously you're like screaming and your mum and dad are like, oh, it's angels looking after you. Of course they're going to say that, right? Because that's what you say to, you know, calm down a screaming child. Not that I think it was anything nefarious. I just don't quite know what it could have been. Is it possible that this iteration of this shadow person that has been seemingly following you your whole life? Is it possible that that is some sort of guardian spirit just not coming across in the best way? And that those orbs that you saw when you were a child is also somehow linked? I tell you what though, whatever the kind of dark shadow figure is, I'm glad your mom took you seriously and was like, okay, well, we're going to get the apartment blessed and we're going to get a priest in, because that is validating your experiences and being like, okay, I'm listening to you, I see that you're really scared, etc. But to me, even though this is terrifying, and I appreciate that it's terrifying, it feels like it's something positive, something that is following you, looking out for you, and you just happen to glimpse it every so often. Again, I will say, people in the afterlife, you need to work on this. You need to work on being less vile and threatening, because people get frightened. Okay? Find a better way to present yourself than a shadow figure that lurks in the dark and watches you. You know, there has to be a better way. Equally, to your friend's mom, lovely that she's coming back to say that she's okay, but turning on the heating, knocking on the door, ringing the doorbell, find better ways. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Thank you to Janelle, Jade, Gracie and Shell for sending in your stories. Remember, the last story came from the 26th of April 2024. And if you would like to send in your story, you can do so by emailing it to reallifeghoststoriespodcast@gmail.com. You can also check out the website reallifeghoststoriespodcast.com. And if you are desperate for some extra content, you can subscribe to the Patreon. That is patreon.com/reallifeghoststories, where for $5 a month or $2 a month, you get access to heaps of extra content, as well as every single main and mini episode completely ad-free. And on that note, I shall see you next time.
Why don't more infant formula companies use organic, grass-fed whole milk instead of skim? Why don't more infant formula companies use the latest breast milk science? Why don't more infant formula companies run their own clinical trials? Why don't more infant formula companies use more of the proteins found in breast milk? Why don't more infant formula companies have their own factories instead of outsourcing their manufacturing? We wondered the same thing. So we made ByHeart, a better formula for formula. Learn more at byheart.com.